Your children are already in debt. They don't know it yet. They haven't borrowed a dollar, haven't signed a loan, haven't made a single financial decision, but they're in debt, deep debt, inescapable debt, because the system has already decided their future. And in that future, they own nothing. They rent everything. They work to service obligations they never agreed to, and they die owing money they could never have earned. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't fear-mongering. This is mathematics. This is policy. This is the explicit design of the economic system being built right now, and the architects of this system. The people creating this dead prison, they're very clear about their vision. You'll own nothing, and you'll be happy. Klaus Schwab said that the founder of the World Economic Forum, not as a warning, as a prediction, as a plan. And when you look at the mechanisms being put in place, when you see how debt is being weaponized, when you understand the intergenerational transfer of obligation, you realize he wasn't joking. This is the future they're building. A future where ownership is privilege, where debt is permanence, where your children are serfs in a system they can never escape. And it's already happening right now, today, while you're working to pay off your own debts, while you're saving for your children's education, while you're hoping they'll have opportunities you didn't. The trap is being set. And once it closes, there's no way out. Let me show you the numbers. The average American born today will inherit $1 million in federal debt. $1 million before they take their first breath, before they speak their first word, before they have any agency whatsoever. They owe $1 million. That's their share of the $34 trillion national debt divided by population. 1 million per person, and growing every second, every day, every year. But it's worse than that, because that's just federal debt. That doesn't include state debt, municipal debt, unfunded liabilities, Social Security obligations, Medicare promises, pension commitments. When you add those when you calculate the real debt, the actual obligations the government has made but can't fund, the number is closer to $200 trillion. 200 trillion divided by 330 million people. That's over $600,000 per person in unfunded liabilities alone. Your children will inherit this, not as a choice, not as an investment, as a birthright of servitude. And here's the sick part. They'll also inherit a system designed to extract from them, a system where education costs hundreds of thousands, where housing costs millions, where healthcare bankrupts, where every basic necessity is monetized, subscribed, rented, never owned. They'll work their entire lives and own nothing, because ownership requires capital, and capital requires savings, and savings require income that exceeds expenses. But the system is designed to ensure expenses always exceed income, to ensure debt is perpetual, to ensure the next generation can never build wealth, only service obligations. This is neo-feudalism, digital serfdom, and it's being constructed methodically, deliberately, with full knowledge of the consequences. So how did we get here? How did America, the land of opportunity, the place where anyone could build a future, become a debt trap for the unborn? Let's go back to a time when debt was limited, when borrowing meant something, when future generations weren't sacrificed for present consumption. For most of American history, debt was avoided. The Founding Fathers warned against it. Thomas Jefferson said that each generation should pay its own debts, that burdening the future with present obligations was immoral, tyrannical, a form of taxation without representation applied across time. And for a long time, America listened. The national debt remained small, manageable. It would spike during wars, then be paid down during peace. There was a moral understanding that debt was temporary, an emergency measure, not a permanent condition. But that changed slowly at first, then catastrophically. The shift began in the 1930s. The New Deal, the government took on massive debt to fund programs, to employ people, to stimulate the economy during the Depression. And it worked, sort of. The economy recovered, but the debt remained. And more importantly, the precedent was set. Debt could be used to solve problems, to buy votes, to provide services without raising taxes. It was political magic. World War II exploded the debt further to 120% of GDP, but that was war, existential threat. Everyone understood. And after the war, the debt was slowly reduced through growth, through inflation, through fiscal discipline. By 1974, debt was down to 32% of GDP, manageable, sustainable, and then everything broke. The break wasn't sudden, it was gradual. A series of decisions, each one seemingly reasonable, each one adding to the burden, until the weight became unbearable. It started with entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, programs designed to help the elderly, to provide security, to ensure dignity in retirement. Noble goals. But the funding mechanism was flawed. Fatally flawed. These weren't savings programs. They were transfer programs. Current workers paid for current retirees. It worked. As long as you had more workers than retirees, as long as the population grew, as long as each generation was bigger than the last. But demographics inverted. Birth rates fell. Life expectancy increased. The ratio of workers to retirees collapsed. In 1950, there were 16 workers per retiree. By 2000, it was 3. Today, it's approaching 2. Soon, it'll be one worker supporting one retiree, mathematically impossible. But instead of fixing the programs, instead of adjusting benefits or raising the retirement age, politicians made promises. Bigger promises, more benefits. Prescription drug coverage, cost of living adjustments, expansions, because cutting benefits loses elections, and politicians care about elections, not mathematics, not future generations, not reality. So they borrowed trillions to fund promises they couldn't keep, to maintain programs they couldn't afford, and they called it investment. They called it compassion. They called it necessary. But it was theft from the future, from your children, from people who couldn't vote against it, couldn't protest, couldn't opt out. And then came the wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, trillions more, borrowed, not through taxes, not through sacrifice shared by the current generation, through debt pushed to the future. Let someone else pay for it. Let someone else deal with the consequences. We'll fight the wars. They'll fund them. By 2008, the debt was $10 trillion. Bad, but not catastrophic. And then the financial crisis hit. And the government's response wasn't fiscal discipline. It was more debt, bailouts for banks, stimulus packages, quantitative easing, trillions printed, trillions borrowed. And within a decade, the debt doubled, 20 trillion, then 30. And nobody stopped it. Nobody said no. Nobody asked who would pay, because the answer was uncomfortable. Your children will pay. Your grandchildren will pay. Generations not yet born will pay. And now we're at 34 trillion and accelerating, adding 1 trillion every 100 days. The interest alone is over 1 trillion per year. More than defense spending, more than Medicare, the fastest growing line item in the federal budget. Interest on debt, money spent on nothing, no services, no benefits, no infrastructure. Just interest. Two foreign governments, 2 banks, forever. This is the debt spiral. Once you're in it, you can't escape. Because to service the debt, you borrow more. And that borrowing creates more interest, which requires more borrowing forever, until the system collapses, until the currency dies, until default becomes inevitable. And who bears the cost? Not the people who created the debt, not the politicians who spent it, not the generation that benefited from it, your children, your grandchildren, the people who had no say, no choice, no representation. If you're starting to feel the rage building, if you're realizing that your children's future has been stolen before they even have a chance, then you need to understand the full scope of the trap. Hit subscribe, because what comes next will show you exactly how they've rigged every system to ensure perpetual debt. This isn't just about government. This is personal. This is deliberate. And it's inescapable. Now, let's talk about the personal debt trap, because government debt is only half the story. The other half, the part that directly imprisons your children, is the private debt system they'll inherit. Start with education. In 1970, you could work a part-time summer job and pay for a year of college. Tuition at a public university was around $400 per year. $400. That's roughly $3,000 today, adjusted for inflation. Affordable, accessible, a pathway to opportunity. Today, the average cost of a four-year degree is over $100,000 at a public university, over $200,000 at a private institution, $100,000 for the same education, the same degree, the same outcome, except now ... It requires debt. Massive debt. Inescapable debt. And here's where it gets evil. Student loans can't be discharged in bankruptcy. By law, you can discharge credit card debt, medical debt, business debt, but student loans, never. They follow you forever until you pay or until you die. And even then, if your parents co-signed, they're liable. This wasn't an accident. This was policy in 2005. Congress passed the Bankruptcy Abuse Prevention Act. Backed by banks, lobbied by lenders, it made student debt permanent, unforgivable, a lifetime obligation. And why? Because banks needed collateral. They needed certainty. They needed to ensure that young people, 18-year-olds who don't understand compound interest, would be debt servants forever. And it worked. Student loan debt is now $1.7 trillion. $1.7 trillion. 45 million Americans carrying an average of $37,000 each. Many owing over $100,000. Some over $200,000, 4 degrees that don't guarantee jobs, that don't pay enough to service the debt, that trap them in perpetual payment plans. Your children are walking into this. They have no choice. Because without a degree, they can't get decent jobs. But with a degree, they're buried in debt. It's a trap. Designed, inescapable. But education is just the beginning. Next comes housing. The American dream, homeownership, building equity, generational wealth. Except ... That's dead. For most of your children's generation, it's already out of reach. In 1970, the median home cost $23,000. Median household income was $9,000. The house cost 2.6 times annual income. You could save for a few years. Get a modest mortgage, pay it off in 15 or 20 years, own your home. Build wealth. Today, median home price is $420,000. Median household income is $75,000. The house costs 5.6 times annual income, more than double the ratio. And that's with interest rates historically low. When rates rise ... when they return to normal, the math becomes impossible. But it's worse than the ratio suggests, because down payments are now required to be larger. 20% is standard. That's $8,000 to $4,000 up front before you even get the mortgage. How does a 25-year-old save $84,000 when they're paying $37,000 in student loans? When rent is consuming 40% of their income, when groceries cost twice what they used to, they can't. So they don't buy, they rent forever, paying landlords, building no equity, accumulating no wealth, while property owners, the ones who already own, see their values appreciate. The gap widens, ownership becomes hereditary. If your parents owned, you might own. If they didn't, you won't. Landlords and tenants. owners and renters, those with capital and those without. And the system is designed to keep it that way. But even renting is becoming untenable. Corporate landlords are buying up properties, private equity firms, investment funds, Blackstone, Invitation Homes, companies buying thousands of single-family homes, not to live in, to rent, to extract. They're converting ownership housing into rental stock, permanently ensuring that your children will have no choice but to rent from corporations forever. And they're not just buying homes. They're buying everything: farmland, apartment complexes, entire neighborhoods, because ownership is power, and power compounds. The more they own, the more they can charge, the more they can extract, the more your children must pay just to exist. And here's the final piece of the trap. The subscription economy, you'll own nothing, and you'll rent everything: music, movies, software, cars, even appliances. Everything is becoming a subscription, a monthly payment forever. It seems small. $10 for Netflix, $15 for 24 cloud storage, but it adds up and it never ends. You're not buying products, you're renting access. And when you stop paying, you lose everything. No ownership, no equity, no assets to pass to your children. This is the model. This is the future they're building. A world where everything is rented, where ownership is corporate, where individuals are perpetual customers, perpetual payers, perpetual debtors, and your children, they'll be born into this. They'll accept it as normal because they won't remember a time when people owned things, when debt wasn't permanent, when futures were possible. Do you see the pattern now? Government debt, they inherit. Student loans, they can't escape. Housing, they can't afford. A subscription economy they can't opt out of. Every system designed to extract, to perpetuate dependency, to ensure they never build wealth, never escape, never threaten the power structure. This isn't conspiracy. This is policy written into law, enforced by courts, celebrated by corporations, and defended by the very people who benefit from it. But here's what they don't tell you. The debt is unsustainable. The mathematics don't work. At some point, soon. The system collapses. The debt can't be serviced. The currency fails. The social contract breaks. And what comes after? Ease, chaos. The wealthy are preparing for this. They're buying land, building bunkers, moving assets offshore. They know the system is failing. They know the collapse is coming, and they're positioning themselves to survive it, to thrive in it, to own even more after the reset. But your children, they're being positioned as the losers, the debt holders, the ones who will bear the cost of the collapse through inflation, through default, through austerity, through the destruction of the social safety net. Everything will be taken from them to pay for debts they didn't create, to fund promises they didn't make, to preserve wealth they never had. And the worst part, they won't even understand what happened. They'll be told it's their fault, that they didn't work hard enough, that they made bad choices, that they should have saved more, spent less, been smarter. But the truth is, the game was rigged before they were born. The outcome was decided, and no amount of personal responsibility could have changed it. This is generational theft on a scale never seen in human history. Trillions of dollars of debt transferred from those who benefited to those who didn't, from those who voted to those who couldn't, from the present to the future, and it's accelerating. Every budget, every stimulus, every bailout, every new program, more debt, more obligation, more burden transferred to your children. While politicians promise solutions, while economists say it's manageable, while the media assures you everything is fine, but it's not fine. It's catastrophic, and your children will pay the price. So what do? How do you protect your children from a system designed to devour them? How do you give them a chance when the deck is stacked, when the future is mortgaged, when ownership is impossible? You teach them the truth. You teach them that the system is not designed for their benefit, that debt is slavery, that ownership is freedom, that they must think differently than their peers, act differently, prepare differently. You teach them to avoid student debt at all costs, to choose careers based on income potential, not passion, to learn trades, to acquire skills that can't be outsourced or automated, to value cash flow over credentials, to understand that a degree is a product, and products should only be purchased if the return exceeds the cost. You teach them to delay gratification, to save aggressively, to live below their means, to avoid lifestyle inflation, to reject the subscription model, to buy used, to own outright, to never carry credit card debt, to treat interest as the enemy. You teach them to invest in assets, real assets, things that hold value, that generate income, that can't be printed, that compound over time, stocks, real estate, businesses, gold, Bitcoin for those who understand it, anything except cash, anything except debt. But most importantly, you teach them that the future will not look like the past, that the social contract is broken, that the promises made will not be kept, that Social Security won't exist, that pensions won't pay, that the government won't save them, that they are on their own, and that's okay. Because self-reliance is strength, dependency is weakness. You teach them to be wolves in a world of sheep, to see opportunities where others see obstacles, to build while others consume, to prepare while others hope, because hope is not a strategy. Hope is surrender, and surrender guarantees defeat. But here's the hardest truth. For most children, it's already too late. The debt is too large, the system too entrenched, the collapse too close. They'll live through the reset, through the chaos, through the restructuring, and on the other side, they'll own nothing just as planned. Unless enough people wake up, unless enough parents see the trap, unless enough pressure is applied to change the system, to cancel the debt, to restructure the obligations, to refuse to sacrifice the future for the present. But that would require courage, would require sacrifice from the current generation, would require admitting that the lifestyle we've enjoyed, the benefits we've received, were funded by stealing from our children. And most people aren't willing to admit that, aren't willing to accept less, aren't willing to pay their own debts. So the spiral continues. The debt grows, the burden increases, and your children's future darkens day by day, dollar by dollar, until there's nothing left but obligation, nothing left but servitude, nothing left but the question, how did we let this happen? And the answer is simple. We were comfortable, we were distracted, we were told it was fine, and we believed the lie. Because believing the lie was easier than confronting the truth. But you can't hide from truth forever. Mathematics is inevitable. Debt must be paid, either through money or through suffering. And since the money doesn't exist, since it can never exist, suffering is what's coming for your children, for their children, for generations. If this revelation has shattered your understanding of the future, if you're seeing clearly that the system is designed not to lift people up, but to trap them in perpetual debt, if you're understanding that your children's inheritance is an opportunity but obligation, then you need to see what we're exposing next. Subscribe, share this with every parent you know, because the next episode reveals the final mechanism, the currency reset they're planning that will wipe out whatever wealth you've managed to build. It's already being designed. And time is running out. The debt spiral isn't slowing. It's accelerating. Your children are being positioned as the sacrificial generation, the ones who will pay for decades of excess, decades of promises, decades of theft. And unless something changes, unless the system is forced to change, they'll live their entire lives in servitude. They'll own nothing. And they won't be happy despite what Klaus Schwab promises. Because ownership is freedom, and they'll have none. Because assets build wealth, and they'll have none. because equity creates opportunity. And they'll have none. They'll rent, they'll pay, they'll service debt they didn't create, and they'll die, still owing, still paying, still trapped. Is that the future you want for them? Is that the legacy you want to leave? Or will you do something different? Will you teach them to see the trap, to avoid it, to fight it, to refuse to participate in a system designed to consume them? The choice is yours, but the clock is ticking. Every day, more debt. Every day, less opportunity. Every day, the trap closes a little more. Your children are counting on you, even if they don't know it yet. Even if they're not born yet, they're counting on you to see the truth, to reject the lie, to prepare them for a world that will not welcome them, that will not help them, that will only extract from them. Will you rise to that challenge? Or will you hope someone else fixes it? Will you act? Or will you rationalize? Will you sacrifice? Or will you consume? Because your children's future depends on the answer. And they're running out of time.